so I need to know how this audio turns out. So just bear with me. You might hear me get a little reverb here because I'm testing a few things. You might hear me get a little reverb here because I'm testing a few things. You might hear me get a little just try some stuff here. Let's see a monitor. Turn that up. Maybe that'll get better. Take that off. Yeah, I think that's better right there. Turn Bluetooth off of it.
Bluetooth disconnected.
Yep, Bluetooth disconnected. I just want to hear it on the device here. So, just looking. Definitely. Like I said, I'm just testing this stuff. You know, I got stuff here in the basement about done, so my studio is going. And trying to get things set up here. So if anybody gets on here, just start chatting. Let me see if I can get my multi-screen chat. So I don't know what kind of delay there is. So if you get in here and start saying this, feel free to, you know, comment so I can know how the audio sounds and, you know, any improvements I can make. Trying to get everything set up here. Been working on it for a while. Go to auto tune. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but we're trying it. Maybe that's a little more bassy. Coming live from Jeff's basement. Bit creepy. I know. Oh, you think that's creepy?
Let's go with this one. This might be a little bit more creepy. Ha 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 ha. What's your name?
What about this one? I sound like Alvin the Chipmunk. Well, no, that's not Alvin. It's not Theodore. What's the other one's name? Got a brain fart going on. It said. So, yeah, Alvin. We got Theodore, and then we got who? Why is my brain stuck?
This is the auto-tune that's got the deep voice.
This is the auto-tune for the Chipmunks. This one might be it. No, what's his name? Darn it. dry it out a little bit. Put a little more. Bam chicka bam wah. No loop back. Loop in, loop in, loop it back. Interesting. This is just numbers, so I have no idea. Short-lived.
What?
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 Huh?
Okay. Oh.
Very well.
That was a bit scary. So, is anybody up? Is everybody sleeping? Because I'm spending some late nights trying to get this stuff set up. And I'm kind of bored. I'm not really tired. Oh, you know what? I forgot something upstairs. It's called something to drink.
Sweet home. That didn't work. Sorry. What if I change this? Does this change anything? It did a little bit. Go down.
Yeah. See, I can get low. And, oh, that's maxed out for this one.
Interesting.
Or auto-tune so you can just hear what I sound like. It changes it a little bit, little bit. Don't mind, like I said, I'm just testing and getting this all worked out. So, again, if anybody's around, feel free to say something. I'm bored. Yeah, always making fun of me. Got it. What does that sound like? Music only. What is that? That was weird. Done. Well, working on it. Let's see. Oh, multi-stream chat. Hey. So I might get your chats from either platform. So I would love to test it out if somebody gets on here and somebody types something in. Oh, look, it blurs and that goes away. Okay. Not sure what this one does. I know. I suck. It's okay. We all suck. Me, you, him, her, he, she, everything in between. Yeah. Question mark.
What?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. I don't want to hide it. I wonder what's in the wonder ball. Do, 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 do. I mean, while I'm sitting here being bored, I'm not sure what to even talk about. So many things on my mind all the time. You know, 'cause it's just never ending thing in this brain that just keeps going. Let me see. What is this? Icon labels. Oh, that's what that is. Settings. Clean. It doesn't tell me the source though. Here we go. Getting somewhere. Getting some. Nope, probably not. Nope. Didn't get anywhere. I don't want no delay. Do not delay. Hold on. Testing out some features. If you hop in here and you see me, say something. So I know if I'm too loud, too quiet. You know, I'm trying to get things adjusted. Or just to talk crap. I don't really care. I'm not one that's easily offended, so whatever. Audio capture, screen capture, small. I don't think that's. Yeah, I don't think that's on this one. Maybe if I move myself. Hold on. I'm gonna shrink my picture. No, it didn't shrink. Huh. Interesting. That must have been the other screen then. That's what it is. Okay, so if I go picture, now I should shrink. And I shrunk. So what is this screen capture? Nothing. Small screen, nothing. Alright. Well, we're going to change that. Screen automatic. Here, I'm going to put my screen on here this way. Now I'd have to move myself. Where should I put myself? Well, we'll figure. Nope, wrong box. Right box. Click, click, shrink, and oh my gosh, I'm so tiny now. Maybe I'll fit right here. I'm gonna have to go get my water in a minute. Let's see. Hey, I think I got that. I think that's good. And then that's my endless screen. It goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. Well, this way, what I can do is I can always go to Google and we can look stuff up. So, like, I don't know, somebody said something, was like, hey, let's look this up. I'm down. Let's figure it out. I don't care if it's theology or politics or gaming or off-road stuff or I wonder. I always wonder what's in the Wonder Ball. Just can never figure it out. but I'm going to. Oh, it blacked out. Somebody's watching. Somebody should comment so I know. Can you hear me? I mean, that's my first question. I heard myself on my own stuff, but doesn't mean I hear you hear me or whatever. You know, got a little chat box. Of course, this chat box doesn't pop up on the screen for some reason. Kind of weird, but I think I have to do some like linking or something. I don't know. I'll figure it out one of these days.
Should I talk like this the entire time? Would that help? Let's see, what was I looking for? Should we do this? Do. I was thinking, I don't know. I'm not good at thinking. Not when I'm by myself. See, and nobody comments. It's like, ooh, I popped in and looked. Oh, you're boring. Goodbye. It's okay. I tell myself that all the time. But without somebody to say, hey, this is what we should talk about, I don't know. What should we talk about? Should I move myself back over here? I don't know. That's what I need your help with. Actually, I'm gonna go get a glass of water. Well, probably a bottle so I can bring it down here. And I will be right back. See? Look, clickety click click. Bang. Oh, I'm back. No views. Everybody left. Everybody left me. I see. Totally unpopular. Just like school. So sad. Not really. That's a weird game to update. Oh, it says I'm live on YouTube right now. Excuse me. Beep beep. Hmm. That's the wrong one. There I am. Now then. Hmm.
Let's go back to auto tune. Let's go. Let's go. Hmm. All right. All right. Oh, it says refresh. I'll refresh it. Oh. Okay. I cannot believe it is that late already. Wow. I wonder. I don't know if I can do that while I am already on live. So, all right. Let's see. What do I mean, maybe, I don't know, but maybe I'll just watch one of the videos. Watch some videos, automatic. Not for a game though. Here, let's try to do this. I'm going to appearance device theme. Yeah, I don't like. That'll be better. Let's go to my page. Huh. So I am going to find a video to watch. That's actually a pretty decent one right there. Here, this is what I'm gonna do. Hold on. That's not what I was trying to do either. But sure, why not? Yeah, show me additional settings, man. I don't want to capture the cursor. I want to capture a window. What is wrong with you? Why won't it let me capture a window? Alright, that might be because I got the wrong one up here. Wait, why are you? You were confusing. I don't need you. I need you close. Okay, I need to. I guess we'll add a source and. That says screen capture. I just want a. Wait, right there. Come on, Jeff. Get with it. Do do do. We'll add that source into here. We'll call it window capture because I'm in. Got it. Add source. Window. Wait with that window. And that's going to go full screen there. Except I'm not trying to go do. Bring this back up. Because I need to see what I'm doing, man. It's there. It's there. Alright, cool. Hey. But why is it taking over? Oh, that's why. Okay. Since we're here, we're going to go ahead and, yeah, actually, I think what I need to do, take this, move it down here. Hold on a second. That's why. I need to adjust it all right here so I can just be like, this way you get to see me do it, right? Make it fit. I still yet to get somebody to comment. It keeps telling me people come in and out, but nobody says nothing to me. Okay, bam. Alright, check it out. I'm gonna have to check this audio, so you might hear it twice or 5 times, I don't know. I could just, sound a little off again. Sounds like I'm in a wet basement, and there's dripping and leaking all over the place. Huh. What? No way. Alright. Turn this up real quick. Okay.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are a collection of ancient manuscripts that were discovered in caves near the Dead Sea in the 1940s and 1950s. They include some of the oldest known copies of the Hebrew Bible, as well as other religious and secular texts. The King James Version, KJV, is an English translation of the Bible that was published in 1611, based on earlier translations and manuscripts. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ in several ways, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls date from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE, while the KJV dates from the 17th century CE. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain some books that are not part of the KJV, such as the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Psalms of Solomon.
Now, why do you think that is?
These books are considered apocryphal or non-canonical by most Christians, but are accepted by some Jewish and Christian groups. The Dead Sea Scrolls also have some variations in the text of the books that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in content. For example, in Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, the Dead Sea Scrolls say that God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God, while the KJV says the children of Israel won. Some scholars think that these variations reflect different traditions or sources that were used by the scribes who copied the texts. Could this be a more broader as not just the nation of Israel but all nations? More examples of how the Dead Sea Scrolls differ from the KJV in detail. Here are some of them.
1 second. Let me go back a little bit here because I wanted to.
Hi, this is Matt Baker.
No.
Today I'm going to show you some of the oldest
Are considered apocryphal or non-canonical by most Christians, but are accepted by some Jewish and Christian groups. The Dead Sea Scrolls also have some variations in the text of the books that are Psalms of Solomon. These books are considered apocryphal or non-canonical by most Christians, but are accepted by some Jewish and Christian groups. The Dead Sea Scrolls also have some variations in the text of the books that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in content. For example, in Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, the Dead Sea Scrolls say that God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God, while the KJV says the children of Israel won. Some scholars think that these variations reflect different traditions or sources that were used by the scribes who copied the texts. Could this be a more broader as not just the nation of Israel but all nations? More examples of how the Dead Sea Scrolls differ from the KJV in detail.
Now you also got to think. Okay. Each scribe has a perspective, each person, and I'm just using the scribes because they're the ones who are going to translate, the word, right? So, you get a bunch of different cultures with a bunch of different but similar beliefs, even some beliefs that are just way different, and you kind of take all those documents and you come down into this singular book, and you got to make them kind of as uniform as you can, right? You got to make them fit together. I mean, but so what perspective was used? And I know a lot about, I'm not saying I know a lot, but I know there's a lot of differences in languages and how, a lot of times you get one word that means multiple different words. So in the process of translating, you kind of got to have some type of perspective on how words are used and so on and so forth. So, depending on the person, you'll get a different translation based on the same letters, but because, that arrangement means this, this, and this, depending on how you look at it, is going to be depending on how you translate it, from one to the other. So, my questions are, okay, who translated it? What all possibilities are there in these translations? It'd be nice to sit down and go through every word, what every possible word could mean, and kind of, open your mind a little bit and see all the possibilities. All right, I'll stop mumbling over here.
Here are some of them. In Isaiah 53 verse 11, the Dead Sea Scrolls say that the suffering servant will see light and be satisfied, while the KJV says he shall see the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied one. Some scholars think that the Dead Sea Scrolls version is closer to the original text, and that the KJV reflects a later theological interpretation of the servant's role.
From Israel.
In Psalm 145, the Dead Sea Scrolls include a verse that begins with the Hebrew letter Nun, which is missing in the KJV and most other manuscripts. This verse says the Lord is faithful in all his words, and gracious in all his deeds. 1. The presence of this verse restores the alphabetical acrostic structure of the psalm, where each verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. In 1 Samuel 10 verse 27, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, "But some worthless men said, 'How can this man save us?' And they despised him and brought him no present." 1. This phrase explains why Saul did not punish those who opposed his kingship, as mentioned in the next chapter. In Jeremiah 33 verses 14 to 26, the Dead Sea Scrolls omit a long passage that is present in the KJV and most other manuscripts. This passage contains a prophecy about the restoration of Jerusalem in the Davidic dynasty, and a promise that God will never break his covenant with Israel. Some scholars think that this passage was added later by a scribe who wanted to emphasize God's faithfulness to his people.
And that's an interpolation, meaning that it wasn't there and it was perceived by a scribe to put it there. So it was interpolated. Carry on.
The book of Genesis is the first book of the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Old Testament. It contains the stories of creation, the fall, the flood, the patriarchs, and the origins of Israel. The book of Genesis and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ in several ways. It is important to note that there are many ways to interpret these texts. Some different.
Exactly what I was explaining. Many ways to interpret the text, because it can be written. Well, I mean, Hebrew, they tend to use, all the consonants. You don't get vowels. You kind of got to put them in there. So everything was written out, and you had to know the structure. So you have to know the whole structure. And also, at times, you have to know the whole sentence to be able to understand what one of the words in the sentence means. So you'd have to read the whole sentence, and then you'd have to basically figure out, which order it is, which word is used here, there, and everywhere. It's just something to think about, all the possibilities,
Differences we will cover right now. The number and order of chapters. The Dead Sea Scrolls divide Genesis into 54 chapters, while the KJV divides it into 50 chapters. The order of some chapters is also different. For example, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Genesis 14, the War of the Kings, comes after Genesis 15, the covenant with Abram, while in the KJV, it comes before. The content and wording of verses. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of verses that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning.
Very much.
For example, in Genesis 4 verse 8, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, "And Cain said to Abel his brother, 'Let us go out to the field.'" This phrase introduces Cain's murder of Abel more explicitly than the KJV, which says, "And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him." The interpretation and application of passages. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes show a different interpretation or application of passages than the KJV, which may reflect the beliefs and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used them. For example, in Genesis 6 verse 4, the Dead Sea Scrolls use the term sons of God to refer to angelic beings who cohabited with human women and produced giants. This interpretation is also found in some ancient Jewish sources, such as the Book of Enoch and Jubilees. However, the KJV uses the term sons of God to refer to righteous men who married ungodly women and produced wicked offspring. This interpretation is also found in some ancient Christian sources, such as Augustine and Luther. These are some examples of how the Book of Genesis in the Dead Sea Scrolls differs from the KJV. And we will continue with a few more books and just a few examples of how they differ. The Book of Exodus is the second book of the Hebrew Bible in the Christian Old Testament. It tells the story of the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt, their journey through the wilderness, and their covenant with God at Mount Sinai.
40 years
The Book of Exodus and the
wandering.
Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ in several ways, and here are some examples. The number and order of chapters. The Dead Sea Scrolls divide Exodus into 40 chapters, while the KJV divides it into 50 chapters. The order of some chapters is also different. For example, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Exodus 16, the manna and quail, comes before Exodus 15, the Song of Moses, while in the KJV, it comes after. The content and wording of verses. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of verses that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in Exodus 3 verse 14, the Dead Sea Scrolls say, I am who I am, while the KJV says, I am that I am. This may reflect a different understanding of God's name and nature.
Let's play
The
that back a
interpretation
little
and
bit
application of passages, the
Hmm.
Dead's name, JV forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in Exodus 3 verse 14, the Dead Sea Scrolls say, I am who I am,
I
while the
am who I
KJV
am.
says, I am that I am.
I am that I am.
This may reflect a different understanding of God.
Right. Well, now, somebody in the comments, get in the comments. I want to hear all the differences. I want to hear different perspectives on what the difference in your understanding of the difference between I am that I am and I am who I am. Let's go back.
God's name and nature. The Dead Sea Scrolls say, I am who I am,
I am
while
who
the
I am.
KJV says, I am that I am.
I am that I am.
This may reflect a different understanding
know.
of God's name and nature. The interpretation and application of passages. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes show a different interpretation or application of passages than the KJV, which may reflect the beliefs and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used them. For example, in Exodus 20 verses 8 to 11, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, and you shall not do any work on the Sabbath day. This may indicate a stricter observance of the Sabbath than the
Okay. And then there's another thing that comes up, about no work on the Sabbath. There's a lot of perspective in it, and I mean, it could be a lot of different things. You got to keep the Sabbath holy, but isn't the Sabbath on a Saturday? I always thought it was Friday night, 9 p.m. I mean, I guess it would be according to your time zone and everything, but it's like Friday night till Saturday night, and that's Sabbath. And you shouldn't, be doing work. You should be, I mean, I guess if you take New Testament perspective on that, the Sabbath is for man, right? It's for you. It's for you to chill, have a seat, enjoy the time, And the work is like your commercial work, like you're going out and doing this and that and getting paid for it, right? I really highly doubt, like, you couldn't do anything. I know there were some communities back then that really took it to heart and were like, yeah, you can't even, save somebody on Sabbath, because if you do that, you're doing work, or you're violating Sabbath and somehow. But I mean, think about it.
the KJV. These are some examples of how the Book of Exodus in the Dead Sea Scrolls differs from the KJV. These differences do not seem to change the overall message or theme of Exodus, which is to reveal God's deliverance and law for his people. The Book of Leviticus is the third book of the Hebrew Bible in the Christian Old Testament. It contains laws and regulations for the Israelites, especially regarding the priesthood, sacrifices, purity, and holiness. The Book of Leviticus and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ in several ways, such as the number and order of chapters. The Dead Sea Scrolls divide Leviticus into 27 chapters, while the KJV divides it into 28 chapters. The order of some chapters is also different. For example, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Leviticus 18, the laws of sexual morality, comes before Leviticus 17, the laws of blood, while in the KJV, it comes after one. The content and wording of verses. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of verses that are common to both collections, such as different spellings,
I guess then I'd have another question. If things were in different orders, and since order matters for the language, would not the change of order alter the meaning of anything? Like, would the words change because the order's different, and you could, compile a different sentence from the same words, the same letters? I guess it could change the word, but the letters, the symbols, if you changed the structure and you changed this in this place and that in that place, would that not also alter the word, the definition, and the meaning? Something to ponder.
Word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in Leviticus 4 verse 2, the Dead Sea Scrolls say if a person sins unintentionally against any of Yahweh's commandments, while the KJV says if a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord. This may
What?
reflect a different understanding of the concept of sin and responsibility. The interpretation and application of passages. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes show a different interpretation or application of passages than the KJV, which may reflect the beliefs and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used them. For example, in Leviticus 23 verses 40 to 43, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, "And you shall take leafy trees and willows of the brook." This may indicate a specific ritual for celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. These are just some examples of how the book of Leviticus in the Dead Sea Scrolls differs from the KJV.
Interesting.
The book of Numbers is the fourth book of the Hebrew Bible in the Christian Old Testament. It tells the story of the Israelites' journey from Mount Sinai to the plains of Moab, their census, their laws, and their rebellions. The book of Numbers in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ, and here are some examples. It is important to note that these are not all the differences, only a few, and I suggest people do their own research as there are several interpretations.
So I
The number
feel
and
about
order
it.
of chapters. The Dead Sea Scrolls divide Numbers into 36 chapters, while the KJV divides it into 35 chapters. The order of some chapters is also different. For example, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Numbers 10, the departure from Sinai, comes before Numbers 9, the second Passover, while in the KJV, it comes after 1. The content and
Now I'm guessing that could alter the timeline too. Like if something came before something else and then it got changed to something came first that didn't really come first, would that not change the timeline? I mean, it just seems like there could be a lot of radical differences, and somehow, people try to keep it so tight. But, I mean, again, research, figure it out. That's what we all got to do.
wording of verses. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of verses that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in Numbers 1:5-15, the Dead Sea Scrolls list the names of the tribal leaders in a different order than the KJV. This may reflect a different tradition or source for the list. The interpretation and application of passages. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes show a different interpretation or application of passages than the KJV, which may reflect the beliefs and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used them. For example, in Numbers 15:32-36, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, "And they brought unto Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation." This may indicate a more formal and communal procedure for dealing with the Sabbath breaker. These are some examples of how the Book of Numbers in the Dead Sea Scrolls differs from the KJV, but the general theme of Numbers, which is to reveal God's guidance and discipline for His people, seems to match. The Book of Deuteronomy is the fifth book of the Hebrew Bible in the Christian Old Testament. It contains the speeches of Moses to the Israelites before they enter the Promised Land, as well as a renewal of the covenant and the law.
And I got to bring this up too, because there's a lot of parallels between, all this Old Testament or, Torah, Talmud, of the old books. There's a lot of parallels between them and a lot of Greek writings. So it's hard to say whether this was possibly written and then rewritten by another group of people in their own way. So it's there's a lot to unpack.
The Book of Deuteronomy in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ in several ways, such as the number and order of chapters. The Dead Sea Scrolls divide Deuteronomy into 34 chapters, while the KJV divides it into 33 chapters. The order of some chapters is also different. For example, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses, comes before Deuteronomy 31, the commissioning of Joshua, while in the KJV, it comes after 1. The content and wording of verses. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of verses that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in Deuteronomy 32 verse 8, the Dead Sea Scrolls say that God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God, while the KJV says the children of Israel.
You know, and there's another thing. Because it would seem that the older text you find makes that God had children, not just one, multiple children. Interesting. But that all depends on what you're following, what you're looking for, what you're seeing, what research you're finding, what if you're looking at any of the archaeology of it, if you're looking at perspective versus what's actually been found, and I mean, there's a lot of differences, it seems.
Some scholars think that this reflects an older version of the text that preserves a more mythological view of God's relationship with other divine beings. The interpretation and application.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that then God would have a wife. If you say, God has a wife, had children, right? And those children were given land. So this really sounds like it talks about a living being on this planet, had a wife that obviously, they didn't really talk about women, so go figure. And then they had children, and they divided lands between the children, and the children ruled over each land. It kind of sounds plausible as a kind of what mythological version of a history that could just be this person had a wife and had children, and they were like, they ruled the areas. They were gods, I know the back in the Persia, in back in the day in the Persian Empire, they thought they were gods, and it's throughout history, a lot of people have believed that they were gods. So, I mean, it really kind of fits that narrative too. So, I mean, there's a lot there, and don't take it as them saying that's it, that's fact. It's not. None of it's fact. None of it's factual. I mean, okay. Well, I guess I can't even say that because there's too many variables to say whether what is factual and what isn't factual, because I'm sure some of it is and I'm sure some of it isn't. But again, the possibilities. Just got to think.
Of passages. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes show a different interpretation or application of passages than the KJV, which may reflect the beliefs and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used them. For example, in Deuteronomy 32 verse 43, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts.
What phrase this time?
The phrase says, "Worship him, all you gods."
Oh.
This may indicate a more inclusive attitude toward other.
What?
What? Let's play that back.
Worship him, all you gods, or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, "Worship him, all you gods." This may indicate.
Worship him, all you gods. I mean, it's there.
a more inclusive attitude toward other nations and their deities. These are some examples of how the Book of Deuteronomy in the Dead Sea Scrolls differs from the KJV. The Book of Jubilees is an ancient Jewish religious work that reinterprets the events of Genesis and Exodus. It is not part of the canonical Hebrew Bible or the Christian Old Testament.
I gotta say this. After, reading Genesis, I've always felt like Genesis is two separate books. Like it's not like two of them are, because in one you get, we're made in God's image, right? And then you get another one that said, they made us, right? It says, let us make man in our image, man and woman. Okay, so basically one book of Genesis says that men and women were created at the same time and that we were made in our image, not, and I mean that saying from the perspective of God. And it would further believe that you would have God and a woman, man and a woman, gods, right? So you have God the male, God the female. And they created us in their image. This goes all the way back to like those Sumerian tablets. They talk about the Anunnaki, the sky people that came and created us to be a slave race because they were mining Earth for their planet because their planet was dying or whatever. So it really does feel like there's a lot of different histories in this book, and it's like somebody made a mistake here. Somebody took a bunch of different cultures with a bunch of different stuff, put them into one book, and then tried to act like it was one people, when it's just no. I mean, if you read it, you'll see. If you actually start in the beginning like you do in a book, and you read it all the way to the end, you'll notice a lot of different things that it's like, well, I mean, we can go through all the people like Dionysus is like Jesus. There's, they pretty much have parallel lives. So, I mean, again, I'm not saying that neither existed. I'm not saying that they may not even be the same person, and it may not have been something that happened longer ago or something that didn't happen, or, I mean, there were some writers back in the day that had imaginations just like we do now, just like how we get some crazy movies and crazy books. And I mean, so really think about it, really get in there and just kind of like dissect and figure, you use an open mind and think about it. If you were made in God's image, like it says, then we all are born with open minds, right? We all want to learn. We all want to know stuff. We don't, so use that, right? Critical thinking.
But it is considered apocryphal or non-canonical by some Jewish and Christian groups. The availability and completeness of the text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, contain 15 fragments of the Book of Jubilees, which cover about 60% of the original text one. The KJV does not contain the Book of Jubilees at all, since it was not part of the Hebrew Bible or the Greek Septuagint that the KJV translators used as their sources. The Book of Jubilees is only available in English through other translations, such as the one by R.H. Charles in 1917. The language and style of the text, the Dead Sea Scrolls, preserve the Book of Jubilees in its original Hebrew language, which is similar to that of the Hebrew Bible, but with some Aramaic influences. The KJV is written in early modern English, which is influenced by Latin, French, and Germanic languages. The KJV also uses a more formal and poetic style than the Book of Jubilees, which
is that leads me to that where I call the KJV a Shakespeareanized version. It's like they dramatized it. They didn't give you every possible perspective of the entire writings because again, we go back to each word, its structure, its form, its location. It all matters. So if you get different manuscripts with it in different orders that could literally change the entire context of that book or that sentence or verse. You know, it's hard to know they got it right, even when you can sit there and find things that kind of contradict, and then you can find things that are just, it's like, now hold on here a minute, why? And you can't say it doesn't. I mean, you could come up with all the excuses you want, but like, it's pretty obvious in some parts. Some parts you could, I get it. Some parts you could be like, well, this and that, and the times back then, I get that, but for the majority of it, like, there's some things that are, I'll go through some videos, we'll talk about it, but there's definitely some differences.
Which is more narrative and didactic. The content and interpretation of the text, the Book of Jubilees and the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV differ in their content and interpretation of the biblical events, since they belong to different religious traditions and contexts. The Book of Jubilees reflects the views and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was a sectarian group that followed a strict calendar, law, and eschatology. The KJV reflects the views and practices of the Protestant Reformation that produced or used it, which was a movement that challenged the authority and doctrines of the Catholic Church. For example, the Book of Jubilees
There's another one right there. Okay, the Protestants, they challenged the Catholics. Now I got a whole perspective, and I'm going to say perspective because, again, who knows for a fact, right? Who knows anything for a fact? Who knows if we're living in a simulation? Who knows if, who knows? We don't know for a fact. We don't know for certainty. It's not beyond doubt. So, I have this whole feeling about how Christianity started, and then how a group of people saw where they could use it to gain wealth and control. Because throughout our entire history and society, people have always wanted wealth and control. So if you can control the belief of the people, you can control the people. So, I mean, I'll go deeper on that stuff later.
Emphasizes the importance of observing the Sabbath on every seventh day, while the KJV allows for different interpretations of the Sabbath commandment. Another example is that the Book of Jubilees adds details and explanations to some biblical stories, such as naming Noah's wife as Amzara and giving reasons for Cain's murder of Abel, while the KJV follows the biblical text more closely. These are some examples of how the Book of Jubilees in the Dead Sea Scrolls differs from the KJV. However, these differences do not mean that one text is superior or inferior to another. They simply show that different texts have different purposes and audiences, and that they can enrich our understanding of the diversity and development of biblical interpretation throughout history. Between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the...
And it's kind of like this. Who writes history? Usually the winner, right? We've had wars, we've destroyed areas, mutilated things. And who gets to write down why it happened, how it happened? The winners, right? The people that ultimately destroy whatever they're destroying. They're the ones that write about it. They're the ones that tell you about it. So, all these variables, man.
The KJV. Here are some of them. The number and order of Psalms. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain some Psalms that are not found in the KJV, such as Psalms 151 to 155, and also omits some Psalms that are found in the KJV, such as Psalms 1 to 41. The order of Psalms is also different in some cases, such as Psalms 9 and 10 being combined into one Psalm in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but separated into two Psalms in the KJV 1. The content and wording of Psalms. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of Psalms that are common to both collections, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in Psalm 145, the Dead Sea Scrolls include a verse that begins with the Hebrew letter Nun, which is missing in the KJV and most other manuscripts. This verse says the Lord is faithful in all his words, and gracious in all his deeds. 1. The presence of this verse restores the alphabetical acrostic structure of the psalm, where each verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The interpretation and application of Psalms. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes show a different interpretation or application of Psalms than the KJV, which may reflect the beliefs and practices of the Qumran community that produced or used them. For example, in Psalm 37 verse 29, the Dead Sea Scrolls say the righteous will inherit the land and dwell upon it forever, while the KJV says the righteous shall inherit the land and dwell therein forever too. Some scholars think that the Dead Sea Scrolls version reflects a more literal and eschatological expectation of inheriting the land of Israel, while the KJV version reflects a more spiritual and metaphorical understanding.
I can tell you this too. It also says, that God will return, and when he does, there'll be strangers in his land.
Of God's promises. These are some examples of how the Dead Sea Scrolls differ from the KJV and Psalms. However, these differences do not change the overall message or theme of Psalms, which is to praise and worship God for his works and attributes. The Dead Sea Scrolls can help us understand how the text of Psalms was transmitted and preserved over time, and how it was interpreted and applied by different communities. They can also help us compare and evaluate other translations and versions of Psalms, such as the Septuagint or modern English translations. Here are some differences in the Book of Samuel in the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain only fragments of the books of Samuel, while the KJV contains the complete books. The Dead Sea Scrolls include parts of 1 Samuel 1-2, 4-17, 19-31, and 2 Samuel 1-2, 5-22-1. The Dead Sea Scrolls have a different text of Samuel than the KJV, which is based on the Masoretic text. The Dead Sea Scrolls text is closer to the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and reflects an earlier stage of the textual transmission too. The Dead Sea Scrolls have some variations in the content and wording of Samuel than the KJV, such as different spellings, word choices, grammatical forms, and even some differences in meaning. For example, in 1 Samuel 10 verse 27, the Dead Sea Scrolls add a phrase that is not found in the KJV or most other manuscripts. The phrase says, "But some worthless men said, 'How can this man save us?' And they despised him and brought him no present." 3. This phrase explains why Saul did not punish those who opposed his kingship, as mentioned in the next chapter. The Dead Sea Scrolls also have some differences in the chronology and structure of Samuel than the KJV. For example, in 1 Samuel 17 verse 4, the Dead Sea Scrolls give the height of Goliath as 4 cubits and 1 span, about 6 feet 9 inches, while the KJV gives it as 6 cubits and 1 span, about 9 feet 9 inches, 4.
And let's see, the Dead Sea Scrolls are dated to the turn of the century, right? It shows they was started writing them probably, it's going to be a variation of dates, but we'll just say about like 300 BC. 300 BCE is when, I guess it could go back to like 500 BCE too, but you can't really say for certainty. So we'll say for anywhere from 500 to 300 BC is when they started, and by the 1st century CE, they pretty much had left Qumran, or they were leaving. And, so you would think that the information given would be closer to the original, meaning that it would probably be more accurate. So the height of Goliath is not as big. Not that 6'9" is not very big, but it's not unnaturally big. There's lots of people that are that tall. So, again, taking some possible truth and then creating a myth, right? There's a big difference between 6'9" and 9 feet tall.
the shorter height is more realistic and agrees with the Septuagint and Josephus.
Right.
Another example is that in 2 Samuel 22, the Dead Sea Scrolls place the Song of David after the list of David's mighty men, while the KJV places it before 5. This may affect the interpretation of the song's context and purpose. These are some examples of how the Dead Sea...
I'll say this, why it keeps saying those random numbers is because when I was building the video, I label everything out and I give kind of a numbering system, and so that I get these points across. You know, I got this 1 point, 2 point, 0.3, 0.4, and so when I build it all on my notepad, I sit there and type it out. Yeah, some things are copy and pasted, you know, because I find some information, and instead of retyping it, it's just like, okay, I'm going to copy this section and throw it here, and then, you know, but most of it's typed out. So then I try to take away the numbers, and you're talking, I don't know, 100,000 words, 10,000 to 100,000 words. It gets a little bit exhausting, and it's a little tough. So, you know, please forgive me that there's, you know, these random numbers, and, you know, AI voices, they just kind of do what they do. So did my best.
Scrolls differ from the
I'm getting better,
KJV and
though.
Samuel. The Dead Sea Scrolls can help us understand how the text of Samuel was transmitted and preserved over time, and how it was interpreted and applied by different communities. They can also help us compare and evaluate other translations and versions of Samuel, such as the Septuagint or modern English translations. There are many differences between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the KJV in the book of Isaiah. Some of the differences are spelling and grammar. The Dead Sea Scrolls use different spellings and grammatical forms than the KJV, which reflect the older stage of the Hebrew language. For example, in Isaiah 1 verse 1, the Dead Sea Scrolls spell the name of King Uzziah as Isaiah, while the KJV spells it as Uzziah. Word order and punctuation. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes have a different word order or punctuation than the KJV, which may affect the emphasis or clarity of the text. For example, in Isaiah 1 verse 2, the Dead Sea Scrolls have a colon after heavens and before Givir, while the KJV has a comma. This may indicate that the Dead Sea Scrolls give more weight to the address to the heavens than to the earth. Word choice and variance. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes use different words or variants than the KJV, which may reflect different textual traditions or sources. For example, in Isaiah 1 verse 3, the Dead Sea Scrolls use the word Baal, meaning owner or lord, to describe the relationship between Israel and God, while the KJV uses Adon, meaning master or lord. This may suggest that the Dead Sea Scrolls have a more intimate or personal view of God than the KJV. Omissions and additions. The Dead Sea Scrolls sometimes omit or add words or phrases that are present or absent in the KJV, which may affect the completeness or accuracy of the text. For example, in Isaiah 1 verse 4, the Dead Sea Scrolls omit the phrase "they have forsaken Yahweh," which is present in the KJV. This may indicate that the Dead Sea Scrolls have a shorter or simpler version of the text than the KJV. These are some examples of how the Dead Sea Scrolls differ from the KJV in the book of Isaiah. The Dead Sea Scrolls can help us understand how the text of Isaiah was transmitted and preserved over time, and how it was interpreted and applied by different communities. Here are a few more documents from the Dead Sea Scrolls not found in the KJV. The Book of Enoch. This book contains various visions and revelations attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. It deals with topics such as the origin of evil, the fallen angels, the end times, and the heavenly secrets. The Book of Jubilees. This book retells the events of Genesis and Exodus in a chronological framework of 50 Jubilees, 49-year periods. It adds details and explanations to some biblical stories, such as naming Noah's wife as Amzara and giving reasons for Cain's murder of Abel. The Book of Tobit. This book tells the story of Tobit, a righteous Israelite who was exiled to Nineveh, and his son Tobias, who went on a journey to collect a debt. Along the way, Tobias was accompanied by the angel Raphael, who helped him marry Sarah, a woman tormented by a demon. The Letter of Jeremiah. This book is a pseudonymous letter attributed to Jeremiah, the prophet who lived in the 7th and 6th centuries BCE. It is a polemic against idolatry and the worship of false gods. The Wisdom of Sirach, this book
And that's a moral thing there. I mean, too many people nowadays idolize, and it creates too much animosity and too many, I'm pretty sure that's, you know, why that moral is there, not to idolize, because you can become obsessed. I mean, there's so many reasons not to. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't like things or enjoy things. It just means don't get obsessed with things. Don't take it overboard, right? Everything in moderations.
book is also known as Ecclesiasticus or Ben Sira. It is a collection of ethical teachings and proverbs written by Jesus son of Sirach, a Jewish sage who lived in the 2nd century BCE. It covers topics such as wisdom, piety, friendship, wealth, and death. There are also other non-canonical books that are not found in either collection, such as the Book of Judith, the Book of Baruch, and the Book of Maccabees. These books are part of the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which was used by some early Christians. They are also part of the Catholic and Orthodox canons, but not the Protestant one. We could go on with all the differences between these two collections. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, smash that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more to come. Stay blessed. May peace be with you.
There we go. Well, that was interesting. What's next? I had an idea, not to get all political. Well, actually, exactly to get all political. Just because I watched the debate with Trump and Kamala, and it just was like, dude, couldn't be more obvious. It couldn't be more flagrant. I mean, it's obvious. So, I wanted to go look at something here. Let's see. Let me get there real quick. All right. Now I wanted to catch some of the debate here. I just want to kind of get some points. Like things that were said. Oh, that could take forever, though. Because I want to keep it to only what was said.
Tonight, the high.
It's probably going to catch the audio, so let me figure that out real quick. Because there's a few things that kept getting said. Okay, I want to start with Kamala here. The question is okay, just to start, and this is just, me being me, and I like to pay attention. And that does not mean only to what people say. I really like to see what people do. And I really like to see how honest people are. And that's just, anyway, so we'll start with her, Kamala's, for the first question, obviously.
were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe America?
I'll say that's one thing I do appreciate is being asked if I'm doing better than I was 4 years ago. You know, it's kind of nice when people ask you and actually want your input.
Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people.
Okay, I'm sorry, Kamala. He did not ask for your plan. He asked a very simple question. Do you think people are doing better now than they were 4 years ago? Simple, right? You would simply be like, nope, I don't think so. Yes, I think so. And then you could give your reason why. But instead, you go the conceited route and you start talking about yourself and how you were raised middle class. Who cares? Okay, there's good people in the middle class. There's bad people in the middle class. There's good people in the lower class. There's bad people in the lower class. There's good wealthy people. There's bad wealthy people. I mean, so that really doesn't matter. And then hold on. Let's see what you have to say. What's your plan?
Of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support.
All right, here, I'll say this. I bought my house while Trump was in office. Right now, I will say this. My house is worth a lot more than it was. Given that's kind of real estate, it tends to do that over, the course of 7, 8 years, whatever, And the issue is, though, that the house price is up. Like, my house payment is basically locked in at, a 2019 rate versus, if I would have got a mortgage to buy my house right now, I would be spending, let's see, it cost me about $400 a month more just in my house payment, and that would just be in interest alone. It would not be towards principal or anything. That would all be interest. So, yeah, that's kind of like,
to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me.
I'll say this. If the economy was good and we were making money, we wouldn't need the government to buy our stuff for our kids, right? You could get your own crib if you have a job making good money and the economy's good, so prices are down, right? So more tax credits means more tax income needed, meaning they have to raise taxes or find a new way to collect more taxes, regardless.
But there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to startup small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy.
So tax credit, how are you going to work that in, for one? Like, what is that? Are you going to say, okay, so your first year of business, you got to put so much money into it, and then you have a liability on your profits and everything. So are you taking that off the liability, like saying your first year you don't have to pay taxes, or not that you wouldn't have to, up to like 50,000, obviously, like she said, but like there's too many variables to that. And the problem with that, again, is somebody's got to pay for it. And the wealthy ain't going to pay for it. Because anytime you tax the wealthy, they add it on to whatever service or product that they provide. Go ahead, increase corporate tax again. Go ahead, increase the taxes on the wealthy. See what happens. We pay for it. Lower and middle class always pay for it. Regardless of how you put it or say it, that's how it is.
My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that
Completely leaving out a lot of context there, too. I mean, not that it's accurate in any way, but like, you have to take the entire plan to understand, right? It's like there's something going to get removed from here, added over here, so that it's more of a fair way to pay tax, right? Because if we all paid 10%, that means we're all paying different rate, different amount, different quantity, different, right? I mean, it may sound right. Okay, everybody pays 10%, but why would I want to go make $1 million then? I'm going to pay $100,000 in taxes. Then I don't want to make quite that much. I would have to sit there and figure out, okay, how much do I want to make to live, and then how much do I, so I have the lowest liability with the most amount of income to, you want the profit. That's what we're trying to do, is make the most money and pay the least. I mean, it makes sense. I'm not one who believes we shouldn't pay taxes, but I'm one that I don't like being forced. I don't like it being stolen out of my paycheck. You don't get a choice, right? So I went a different route with my life. I think that's stealing. You don't take from what a person owns and what a person earns. Tax them on what they purchase. I can understand that. Tax the corporation on what, all their imports, so on and so forth. There's a lot of variables, but there's certain ways I don't think you should do it. I think it's stealing. Like making me pay thousands of dollars a year in taxes on my house, and then threaten to take my house. Say I come up on hard times and I can't afford to pay my taxes. Oh, get out. They take it. Like, that's not right. That's not America. That's not. That's like communism, and I only say that because the government takes your freaking property. Then they sell it to get their money, and they're supposed to give you the difference, but good luck with that one.
that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars.
Oh, yeah, and then they'd love to not tell you how they kept some of Trump's tariffs. And the reason we got inflation, there was a heavy investment in a thing, Keystone Pipeline, right? And then they just sign it off and dead. And they're like, oh, that ain't gonna, no, gas prices literally jumped. Why? Because they got to recoup their money. And guess who pays? The consumer, the middle class. So, and then you can go down the line of all the things that they killed this, and this, and then they kept this, and this, which made record inflation. And then they're like, it's all Trump's fault. Oh, it's all Trump. It's like, no, had you not killed the pipeline and had you done it, a proper way, I don't think gas would have got crazy out of control again. I don't think, I just don't think it would have. I think food prices would have stayed down. Like, I feed a lot of kids, man. It's expensive. Our grocery bill has doubled in the past 3 years, literally. No joke. They can tell you whatever they want, but I'm the one who has to pay for it. I know exactly what it costs me. It's crazy.
as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're
Yeah, actually, you can go watch the special on YouTube about Ecuador and the president of Ecuador even saying, like, you can tell he will not say exactly how it happened, why all of a sudden they're like one of the lowest crime rate countries. He'll tell you, oh, we just kicked them out. Where'd they go? Oh, Kamala and Joe. They brought them here. Crazy.
coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over.
And also, you can say, oh, that's a lie. They're making that. No. You can go watch. Plenty of YouTubers have gone down there and went and asked questions and went and seen and talked to people. And if you're, if you look and you pay attention to what's going on in the background, you'll see obviously some crazy stuff is going on. And it may not be as crazy as some people will say, but it is definitely going on. Ain't no BS into it.
Buildings, they're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Okay. So the pandemic, COVID, created in a lab that actually was tied to Fauci and Biden, Fauci, Biden, and Obama. Okay, because all the work they were doing was being done in America, but Obama passed a law, they had to outsource it. And because Biden is so chummy with China, Fauci and Biden moved the research to China. Now, in the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a special that was on Fox. And a lady sat there and told you they've tested it. They know this is the COVID. This is the makeup. They broke down the details, and it has a signature that it was created in a lab, and they know exactly which lab it came from. Okay, they told you right in the beginning, but it was a big lie, right? Now all of a sudden they'll tell you it came from China and China was dishonest with us. No, Obama, Fauci, Biden, Miss Kamala Harris, they were dishonest with you.
Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century.
How are you going to blame Donald Trump for COVID? That's literally what she just did. She's just like, hey, it's your fault. You left us with COVID. Like he created COVID. Well, I mean, I will say what he did do was he got a thing called warp speed going, which helped create the vaccines and made it happen faster because obviously we were in a pandemic. However, I don't think we have all the information. I don't think that they were very honest with us about the vaccines. I think that we had the information that China had, because again, China was where this was started, where it was created. Well, part of it, because obviously some of the stuff was done here in America years ago, and that research got continued there. So, behind, right? And again, if we had the information, we would have been quicker about getting people some type of vaccine, or at least a treatment. But what the worst part was the fact that every time somebody come out and was like, I did this and this helped me get through COVID a lot better than anything else. It was so easy. They got told, oh, you can't do that. Nope, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. Ivermectin, that's wrong. This, that's wrong. That's wrong. And then what, a couple years later, all of a sudden, oh, well, we were wrong because that actually does help. That is a very good therapeutic. Should be pretty obvious to people, you would think.
Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all, in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling.
Huh. Did she just give away her plan for the night? She's just going to use the same playbook. She's going to lie and name call. All right. Well, you know what? Actually, guys, I need to go to bed. I'm tired. This was all supposed to just be a test, and then I just started watching videos and started talking, whatever, I get carried away with shit. Again, I was only supposed to be testing stuff. So, I'm going to get off here, and hope you all have a good night, and, leave some comments, with perspective. I want to know what other people see. I want to know what they believe. With this part, I wanted to get into some of the things that were, some statements that were made that were already debunked and proven false, freaking literally a week after this situation's happened, or less than. And anybody who actually watched the entire thing and not just the 2 to 10 second clips of it, they know. So anybody who says otherwise, you're uninformed. You literally just watched a 2-second fucking clip and didn't pay attention. You didn't care because it's just because you don't like somebody, whatever. But you really should pay attention. But anyway, y'all have a good night. I'm gonna shut this down. Appreciate it. Peace.